Joining me now on the next edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show, with the Knicks about to play the Cleveland Cavaliers for the third time this season, potentially with Donovan Mitchell. And I'm sure that will come up and nobody will talk about what happened this summer. We've all moved on and it will never be mentioned once in a pregame or postgame, like in the podcast you're about to hear. He is one half of the Chase Down podcast, which used to be part of the Blue Wire podcast family, but instead graduated to the Cleveland Cavaliers media family. He is Justin Rowan. Justin, welcome to the Knicks Film School pregame show. How you been?
I've been great, Andrew. Thank you so much for having me back. I love the work that you guys do. And we're still got the Blue Wire roots at heart. So we're all still part of the same family in spirit.
Might I call you aspirational, Justin? The roots and the path that you eventually took. Yeah.
Please don't. At the end of the day, this is still just a side hobby for us. We have a lot of fun doing it. It's still an honor that the Cavs have kind of enabled us to do it and occupy this lane. But at the end of the day, we're just fans being stupid and trying our best to at least be a little informed while we're being stupid.
I might like steal that for a slogan in the future. Fans being stupid, but trying to be informed while being stupid. Might be a Knicks Film School logo in pretty soon.
You know, I got my start aggregating on SB Nation sites, so I'm all here for aggregation. You know, it makes the world go around, especially these days.
There you go. So the Cavaliers 29-19. I wonder. Obviously, we're going to talk about Donovan Mitchell because we haven't had a Cavs person on to talk about this summer and how things were going one way or seemed to be going one way, and obviously went another way for us here in New York. But as far as this season goes, how are the vibes? Is it everything you thought it would be? Is it worse? Is it better? What's the season been like?
Yeah, I think the vibes have been pretty damn good for the Cavs this year. I think there was more of an expectation of a prolonged growing period. And it's funny because it's almost like they've had a little bit of that delayed. I would say the last month has been a little bit more testy for the Cavs. And even looking at the schedule, it was anticipated that January would be the toughest month. But the problem is a lot of the struggles are coming in the games that you wouldn't have thought would be an issue, right? Like dropping a game against the Warriors where they rest their starters, being up against the Timberwolves, and then as soon as Rudy Gobert goes out of the game, you blow that lead. Frustrating loss to the Jazz where you give up a 7-point possession and everything kind of goes sideways from there. So there's definitely been some growing pains, but overall, I think it's been a very encouraging season. You look at that first month, the first full month that Garland and Mitchell got to play together, which was November. Garland was averaging 24-9. Mitchell's 27-4, playing so well off each other. You had some games where Mobley and Allen got very involved as well, but injuries have definitely been part of the story. I believe they're third in player games missed at this point of the year. Obviously, Darius Garland had the eye injury in the opening minutes against Toronto. Never fun to play the Raptors. You're always going to leave with at least one injury.
Can confirm, as the Knicks have played the Raptors 4 times in the last 3 weeks and have lost two more key rotation players in the meantime.
Yeah, well, the Cavs lost Dean Wade in their second meeting against the Raptors. I believe he tried playing another day or two after that and ended up missing 7 weeks. So Dean Wade is now back in the lineup. Darius Garland was dealing with a thumb issue on his shooting hand, but it is now out of that thumb sling and has been playing a lot better these last couple games. So things seem to be trending in the right direction, but it's just a matter of this team trying to find some consistency.
So is that the focus right now, that it's obviously getting healthy is a thing you want to eventually focus on, but is this the team going forward? Obviously, with the picks that went out in the Mitchell trade, not much can be done as far as there's no Anunoby trade, obviously, but as far as upgrading the roster, as the Hachimura trade, the time of recording happened minutes ago. And it seems like trade season is officially upon us for those of us looking to upgrade our rosters. Is there a hint of outside help that the Cavs are looking for? Or do you think that it's what we have here is what we're going to war with this playoff?
I would expect a trade, honestly, just because historically the Cavs have always made a trade at the deadline. Like, that's been part of the fun of covering the Cavs is they're never really sitting on their hands. And it'll be interesting to see which direction they go, because they do not have first round picks to play with. They do have quite a few seconds. They also have expiring contracts. You have the Karis LeVert expiring contract at $18 million. Jetty Osman's a partially guaranteed contract. Kevin Love, obviously a big expiring contract, although I don't really anticipate him being on the trade market. But you've heard the rumors of them being connected to Tim Hardaway Jr. As a potential Karis LeVert swap, which depending on how you feel about each player, you could say one is better than the other. But I think the theory behind that would be kind of fitting and getting a volume movement shooter alongside Mitchell and Garland. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a move on the margins. But in terms of needle movers, I don't think you're going to get that on the trade market. Like, with the Cavs being as young as they are, the only thing that's going to move the needle is internal growth from Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, and even Jared Allen, because he's only 24 years old, which is easy to forget. But Donovan Mitchell, I think, is the closest thing they have to a finished product. But outside of that, internal growth is really the most important thing.
Yeah, that was what the case was made when we were talking ourselves out of what almost was a Donovan Mitchell trade in New York. That just how ready the Cavs were to make an all-in move like that, because a Mobley could get better, a Garland could get better, other pieces could get better. And, that's how you build up the core around Mitchell. Is that, well, I guess I'll ask you personally, it's kind of a two-part question. The expectations for this season, are you able to enjoy the season as it's going? Because like you've got this great player, you've got this fun team, or do the playoffs kind of present this like that's when the season actually starts? And I guess also, how do fans feel about it? Like, well, what's the general tone around the fan base? That are they able to enjoy these regular season moments, or is it kind of just waiting to see what the return on this all ends up being in the postseason?
I think it's been a bit of a split. Now that football season is over, you're getting an influx of kind of the general Cleveland fans and Browns fans. And I think there's an expectation that, you traded for Donovan Mitchell, that means you're a contender. Where the Cavs, even at the introductory press conference and media day this year, the expectation isn't championship this year. Like, frankly, like even if you added a bona fide small forward that doesn't have any questions, it's a perfect fit. Let's say you cloned Harrison Barnes and you dropped him on the Cavs. I don't think you win this year, because experience matters so much. And even looking at Boston finally got over the hump last year with the core that they had, but their first real taste of the playoffs came in 2018 against the Cavs, right? Like that Eastern Conference Finals. They should have beat Cleveland, and inexperience and LeBron going nuclear was the only reason that they managed to eke out a very small victory in Game 7. Those growing pains, the growing pains that Giannis went through with Milwaukee and all these teams that organically are built, it's typical. And I think you're going to see that with the Cavs, no matter what roster moves are done. So I think the expectation among at least ourselves and a lot of the Cavs fans is get to the second round. Try to, avoid the play-in tournament, because that was a nightmare last year. Win a playoff series. And the best way to do that is by playing well in the regular season and giving yourself a more favorable matchup in the first round. So I think that is the priority. I think you're feeling a little bit of angst right now just because of like some PTSD from last season, where the Cavs had a front-loaded schedule like they do this year. At this point on, the Cavs have the second easiest schedule in the league for the rest of the season, which was the same case last year, where at the All-Star break, they were about a game out of first place in the East. But then you lost Darius Garland for the majority of February. You lost Lauri Markkanen. You lost Karis LeVert. Then when those guys came back, you lost Jared Allen. You lost Dean Wade. You lost Evan Mobley. It was just a nightmare, right? Like just because the schedule is going to get easier doesn't mean you're going to win those games. So I think fans want more of a cushion. And a big part of that is beating the Knicks tomorrow. Like that's going to be really, really important to buy some more breathing room, because even though you're closer to 2 than you are to 7, that can shift with a bad week in the NBA.
Well, I got good news for you. You're catching the Knicks at the perfect moment with no Mitchell Robinson, no Emmanuel Quickley, a team that they need bench help, right? Like yesterday, they needed bench help. Maybe a couple weeks ago, they needed bench help. And then there's so much Tibbs conversation about minutes distribution, and so maybe when they are getting contributions from their bench, is he letting them play long enough? And
is there a single fan base in the NBA that's happy with the rotations and adjustments? Like, I feel like that is the one consistent criticism where I'll see Heat fans talk about that, and I think Spo is the best coach in the league. I see Spurs fans doing that. Like, every single fan base, I feel like it's because it's such a vague critique. It's the guy that isn't playing. It's almost like the backup quarterback conversation when you're not happy with the starter. The backup is always the most popular guy because he's not the one out there making mistakes.
So it's funny. You're actually hitting on a question I was going to save for later about Bickerstaff, because I saw last year during the playoffs, and this is after us in Knicks land had one of the more, what would seem on the outside like just a very blasé 37-45. All right, so you were good last year. You took a step back, and like you weren't terrible. But on the inside, the turmoil and the venomous conversations that happen amongst the fan base of why aren't they playing the younger players more? Why is Alec Burks starting at point guard? Why is Taj Gibson getting meaningful minutes in crunch time? And it was like he won't play the kids. He doesn't believe in young players. Emmanuel Quickly still getting 17 minutes a game. Obi Toppin should be playing more minutes than Julius Randle. And one of the critiques that I just kind of tapped out of the conversation was like, if the front office wants to step in, this ends up being on them at some point. When the Cavs were eliminated, and I saw some of Cavs Twitter getting on JB Bickerstaff for some rotations he could have gone to, some adjustments he could have made. It was actually a tweet from you that you said something to the effects of blaming the coach is a bit of a cop-out. Players know what they're supposed to do. I can't just, like, it might fall somewhat on him, but like, the players have to be held accountable too. And I think that's kind of where I lean. I don't think Tibbs is perfect. I think you're hitting on a theme that I've noticed from these podcasts, like the couple of Raptors pods that I did where the people are in Toronto apparently complaining about Nick Nurse.
They want him gone. Yeah.
Is amazing. Cause I'm like in New York where everyone's like, we should be more like Nick Nurse. And it's like, wait, okay, this is fascinating. Is that something that you obviously you just pointed out that you see it in every fan base, that it's like, it's clearly the coach's fault. Is that something you've seen at all pop up with Cleveland, that, with JB, this is like the first year with a contender that maybe he's not the guy? Or is it kind of like, oh, you know what? He's a young head coach, and he's our guy for now.
Yeah, well, the Cavs did give him an extension last year, so
clearly the guy for now. Yes.
Yeah. So for fans that are worked up about that, I think you're going to have to suck it up for a little bit. I have actually noticed recently, especially reintegrating Ricky Rubio into the lineup, coming in off that ACL, and a few new parts coming back as they get healthy. There's been times where I feel like sometimes someone might get forgotten on the bench, or Isaac Okoro, as he's starting to play more consistently and really making an impact on the team. Nights where I would like to see him a little bit more. But I honestly, and this is a rant that I've gone on for a few times, but I feel like the modern debate culture, when it comes to sports talk, we've turned winning and losing into something that's either genetic or a character trait. So when a team comes up short, we don't want our players, which are the hardest part to replace on a team, to be labeled as not clutch, or they're not winning players, empty stats and all that. So the obvious direction you go there is to blame the coach, because that's the easiest thing to do, where players, as well as coaches, I should add, have good and bad games where they don't execute, games where, they've, like, for example, the Cavs have played every other day since December 26th. They've played 13 games in, I think, 24 or 25 days. Like, there's going to be a collective and cumulative fatigue when you're doing that. And I think that might be somewhat contributing to the inconsistent play that you've seen. But a lot of times it comes down to execution. Like, when the Cavs give up a bunch of open threes in a game, you can automatically say, okay, well, this is the team falling apart defensively. JB Bickerstaff is schemes, giving up too many open threes. There's been a few nights where teams have shot like 60, 70% from three. And then you look at the stats, and the stats say the Cavs give up I think they're bottom 5 in terms of most open threes allowed. Like, they don't give up a lot of open shots. So what is it? Is it that night they just didn't have their focus, didn't execute defensively? Like, I think the Warriors game is a prime example where they just kind of assumed all the reserves were going to start missing shots at some point, and they just didn't. I just think, because we're so kind of like trying to analyze whether or not our players are winning players, and we don't want to ever, especially if you're online all the time and you're always talking trash about your players versus other players, you don't want your guys to come up short. And if they do come up short, we need to blame supporting cast. We need to blame coaching. We need to blame anything but the players. When anybody that's played sports, you have good and bad games. You learn from the experiences. Coaches have good and bad plays, right? Like, I think we treat coaches like static commodities, that they're good and bad. And when they're good, they're just doing their job. And when they make a mistake, it's all of a sudden revealing this flaw that they have that has to be corrected through a coaching change or something like that. When in reality, coaches have good and bad games. They have good and bad plays. They grow with the team or they stagnate. And for me, right now, you have the Cavs buying into what JB Bickerstaff is doing. And that is the most important thing.
Well said. Extremely well said. I'm here for
bit of a rant. Sorry for jumping on the soapbox there.
Believe me, it's the number one thing that is the most polarizing topic here in New York, at least. And this isn't just a Knicks thing. For the Nets fans that do exist, like Steve Nash was a hot button issue. Oh my gosh, ask a Yankee fan about Aaron Boone. Man's won nothing but 100 games year after year, and you would think he's the worst manager that the team has ever had. And I think it's tough to evaluate how good and bad a coach is, which is why I end up coming just back to what you can evaluate respectfully. Like, I don't. The stats and the data only take you so far from what you don't see behind the scenes, but
and you can kind of tell, right, with buy-in, right? Like, if you have a prolonged period where the team just doesn't seem to be getting an effort and there's a disconnect, like, you can feel that. Like, I think you saw that with the Nets and Steve Nash, where the voice kind of ran its course, right? And there just wasn't a fit there. But we simplify things to thinking the front office is one person and the coaching staff is one person that makes all the decisions. We don't know how things are delegated, right? Like, even from a Cavs perspective, I don't see JB calling out a bunch of plays from the sideline. I think it comes down to Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell often, right? Like, he kind of trusts those guys to make decisions on the go, to read and react, and they have their set plays. This year, they're not as good after timeouts. Last year, they were very good after timeouts, right? Like, there's some variance to it. You have new pieces in and out. You don't know how things are delegated throughout a coaching staff. So it really is kind of tough to figure out exactly what that is. But that's why I think it's more important to focus on kind of those macro trends. Like, and also just being honest, like the Cavs having the 12th best offense in the NBA, to me, given the limitations they've had, like missing Darius for large parts of the season, you're often playing with 3 non-shooters. Like, it takes work schematically to go do that. Like the amount of like split cuts, the horns that they run, all that kind of stuff to generate spacing without spacers. To me, that's indicative of a good coach. And I'm just curious to see that if the personnel does change and you do add shooting, does the offense evolve? And that's the most important thing. As your players and your personnel improve and evolve, does the offense improve and evolve alongside with it?
You just said a trigger phrase that a lot of upset Knicks fans would get upset by. The saying where the team is in offense, even though they don't like how the offense is. Like, the Knicks run a ton of isolation with Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson, and at times it can get stagnant, especially in crunch time. They're up to 6th in offense this season, and that's why I'm trying to, like, I hear you. Like, I don't love the isolation. They also have like nobody that's consistently good from 3. So when they are getting good looks, they're number 1 in the league at open looks. And they're just not hitting them. They don't have like they don't have a single 40 point. Maybe Jalen Brunson's up to 40%, but I hear you on the conversation.
Which it happens on the flip side for Cavs fans, like especially, as I said, I think the influx of Brown's Twitter has kind of had an impact on that, because they're still lashing out from the hurt that they're feeling. But like, on a night where the Cavs give up a bunch of threes, we'll sit there and we'll say, well, at the time they were first, they're second right now defensively. And the response I'll get is, I don't care. I see what my eyes see, and they're the worst defense. They're the worst defense in the league. Trust me, they're awful. They give up threes. And I think some of it might also be a product, and this is nobody's fault, but not watching more games than the ones your team plays in, like, because you just have such a skewed idea of what basketball should look like. And there's so many outlier performances, so many outlier results. The offense is up around the league. Like, the Cavs, as I said, give up fewer wide open threes than most teams in the league, but the league average for wide open threes given up where no defender is within 6 feet is 17 a game. Like, if another team is hitting some of their contested shots and they make a good percentage of that 17, it's going to feel like you're the worst defensive team in the league. And that's NBA right now, because there's so much talent at every single position. We're no longer playing games where 2 out of 3 guys or two out of 5 guys don't know how to play basketball or are on the team for one specific role. Everybody can do more these days. Even the big men are good passers. And it just makes it so hard to consistently sustain defense for a full 24-second possession. And if an offensive rebound happens or a loose ball happens and there's a bit of a scramble, God help you, you're going to give up an open shot if the other team recovers it.
The key critique lately, especially on the defensive end, has been drop coverage, because the Knicks play a lot of drop coverage because they like to pack the paint. That's like a Tibbs principle. And like Isaiah Hartenstein, you're going to see it tomorrow, is not the greatest defender when it comes to drop coverage. So
I remember his time with the Cavs.
So there you go. Those 10 minutes that he's going to play tomorrow, be ready for the pick and roll to lead to points, because that's just how it's been.
Or trips to the free throw line with him.
Well, it's funny. He hasn't been that much of like an undisciplined defender. It's just been like dropping entirely too far, dropping entirely too early as well. So it's
being that foot slow, right? So that when you do recover, because you're a second slow, there's going to be some contact and it's going to be called, right? Like, that's the kind of small stuff in the margins.
So there's a lot of Knicks fans that wish that we'd switch more, and that because it's not just Hartenstein. It was Mitchell Robinson when he was in. It's Jericho Sims. It's Julius Randle. It's just like a thing they do. And it's like, we're the only team that does this. And last week, or I guess maybe a week and a half ago, doing some research on the Wizards, and I'm watching Taj Gibson be in drop coverage against the Bulls. And it's like, wow. So it's not just us. So you got a point there that a lot of fans just watch their team and think it's just their team. Yeah, it's some criticisms can be justified.
For sure.
And what's funny, I was gonna ask this as a random follow up, but you mentioned Brown's Twitter coming in, or just Brown's fans now paying attention. What's the split there as far as Cleveland is concerned? Is as far as how big is the pie to like the Guardians, I'm an out of towner, so it's a little tougher for me. Obviously it is a Browns town and all that, but I just think, and I honestly think some of it does have to do with how last season went too, right? Because the most fun parts of the Cavs season were that lead up, right? January was their best month of the year. You're at the All-Star break and you're a game out of first place, and then the season falls apart. So for them, I don't blame you, right? If you're a casual fan and football's more of your thing, you come in a little later to the party. And last year, you saw the team fall apart. Obviously, injuries had a large part to do with that. And then you come this year and they're playing, 5-5, 500 basketball. Some losses, like the losses coming in games that they should win and stuff like that. Like, you're going to feel some frustration. You're going to say, this is it's the same old Cavs and all that. When in reality, like, it's frustrating. It drives me nuts when you drop a game like that, because even if they took care of business against the Warriors, like, that makes a big difference in the standings when you're trying to get home court. But this is part of the growing process, right? And I just think, especially as this team gets healthier, they have a real good chance to start to go on a run. But the biggest thing for them is they need to start
like they got to get a little Memphis in them where you just kind of enjoy running teams into the ground, because I feel like too frequently they get up by 14, then take their foot off the gas a little bit. And you just can't do that with the offenses in today's game.
So speaking of the offenses in today's game, the Knicks currently have the 6th ranked offense with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. One might wonder what that would look like if another player existed in that offense. Donovan Mitchell got traded to the Cavs this summer. I spent my entire summer, Justin, I kid you not, every morning was me texting John and Jeremy, the hosts of our show, like, okay, here's the plan. If it happens today, like, we'll go live. I have the graphic ready. There is in a recycle bin in my computer a emergency live stream cover art of Donovan Mitchell potentially going to the Knicks that just never saw the light of day. How did you experience it? And like, was it not real until it happened, or did you start to? Well, I guess, given the connections that you have to the team, did you like know something was coming before the rest of the world did?
No, honestly, like that's one thing. With our partnership with the Cavs, we're not getting intel from them, and
tell you nothing. Okay.
But the nice thing is, right, like we're able to kind of freely give our analysis and stuff like that. So, you know, we both kind of leave each other alone.
Yeah, I get it.
Which is nice. Honestly, when there were the connections to Donovan Mitchell, I thought what that meant was that the Cavs were going to get involved as the third team. I did not think that they were going to pull the trigger on Donovan Mitchell. You were in a position where you did have Colin Sexton, who honestly, like, I think he's underappreciated. He puts up really good numbers. I still think, like, even though it happened on a bad team, there's some merit to being able to score that well efficiently. And again, like this year, I think per 36, he's putting up 21 and 4 on 60% true shooting percentage. Like, he's a good player. And my whole thing was, I was always curious, like, if you're going to go all in, yes, Donovan Mitchell is a better version of Colin Sexton, but it comes with a lot of the same flaws. You don't have the assets to fix up your situation at the small forward position. Is it in fact worth it? And what ended up happening for me is, after the trade kind of went down and I was thinking it through, I remember that we had those same conversations the previous summer when it came to Jared Allen, where people were so worried about paying him $20 million a year, which seems hilarious at this point. Because I think Jared Allen at 24 years old, he's probably already better than Rudy Gobert this season, which, like, it's a steal of a deal at this point. But people were saying, why did you pay him that when you could get like 85% of that with like Rashawn Holmes for cheaper, right? But that extra 15% is the toughest thing to find in the NBA. And for me, looking at Donovan Mitchell prior to the season, he had only had 1 year of league average efficiency. There were questions about the defense and all that. But then when we had Tony Jones on from The Athletic talking about it, he was talking about how Mitchell wasn't happy with himself last year, that he wanted to be in better shape, really was kind of owning up to his own shortcomings, hadn't really requested a trade, but understood that the Jazz were probably rebuilding. And like, the fit has just been fantastic. And I think so many of the gambles that the Cavs were making with that trade have paid off. Oh, if he plays alongside Darius Garland, efficiency is probably going to go up. It's going to take a load off him. If you take that load off him, he's probably going to be able to contribute on the defensive end, which he has done. Like, he's just playing the best basketball of his career, and it's just been a seamless fit. So I think sometimes you can fall in love with your own players, and you talk yourself into that. We had heard all summer in the interviews we had done that the Cavs really liked Lauri Markkanen, and they felt that he was going to have a breakout, that he was the closest thing to a fourth member of that core. But when you have the opportunity to add someone like Donovan Mitchell, that's really hard to do. And to get a young core of 4 guys like Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen, that's hard to pass up. So I really have come to love the deal. And obviously, with the way that Donovan's embraced the city, embraced the team, the fact that there hasn't been any friction, it's really been a lot of fun from our perspective.
So from your perspective, when you saw, I guess, throughout the summer, the connections to the Knicks and how the conversation seemed to just be like, eventually this will get done.
Yeah.
Was there a sense of like the Cavs got one over on the Knicks, or that the Knicks blew it in a sense?
I mean, I believe I said this on a Twitter Spaces before talking to some Knicks fans, but I felt like it was.
Hold on. You dove into Knicks Twitter Spaces, or had we have a Twitter Spaces show. Shout out to our buddy Sean with a W that is part of our crew and is in charge of our Twitter Spaces show, and he's in the trenches of Knicks Twitter Spaces often. So I applaud you for engaging in that battlefield. You know,
that's no problem at all. I'm not going to shy away from a fight or a debate. But honestly, I thought it was a blessing in disguise for the Knicks. I thought that Donovan Mitchell was the piece you brought in when you had everything else to kind of help put you over the top. And from a New York perspective, like I just thought like the pairing, especially. We didn't know that Julius Randle was going to bounce back in the way he has this year. But just the pairing of Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson, I didn't love that as much as Garland and Mitchell. Brunson's obviously been fantastic, but I think the gamble you would be making if you made the trade for Donovan Mitchell was Brunson and Mitchell is enough to attract a third star. Like if we clear the cap space around them, that will bring in the star. But without that, looking at how competitive the Eastern Conference is, if you're giving up a lot of kind of your wing depth, if you're giving up Grimes and Barrett and first round picks and whatever, that's going to put you in a tough position. And I just didn't know how that was going to go. And I just feel like for the Knicks, being a little more patient, taking the organic route, developing the young talent they have, and they still have that war chest of first round picks. And if they could add like a wing that's a little more dynamic, like I just feel like they're going to be in position to strike. But I just didn't feel like Donovan Mitchell at that time was the best situation for the Knicks. Like from a Cavs perspective, I wasn't going to be too fearful of the Knicks if you guys got Donnie and the Cavs didn't. Like if they just kind of stood pat with Colin Sexton, Larry Markkinen, and whatever kind of moves on the margins they would have done if the Mitchell trade did not occur.
So first of all, thank you for saying it, because there's been a few moments this season when the offense has struggled, and obviously there was a 71-point game that if it had happened in Madison Square Garden, I'd still be talking about it. But the bigger takeaway, even if it is like, the Knicks tried to trade for Donovan Mitchell, so it's tough to be like they didn't walk away. You know, the process I still have so many issues with. It felt more like they fumbled the ball at the one, but it ended up being a touchback or a touchdown anyway. You know, like the analogy I was using was that they jumped out of the airplane without a parachute, but they landed. So it's like, oh great, you landed, but no, you still jumped out of the airplane without a parachute. And
Mitchell's leap this season, right? Like that changes the equation. Like I'm thinking back to how I felt at the time. Like, but everything in the NBA is so context driven. And again, this gets back to how we evaluate players. And so often I think it's more about situation and whether or not guys are getting maximized. And the fact that they, no matter what, like you look back at Mitchell last year in Utah, they staggered him and Rudy Gobert because they're like, we need to have one of them on the court at all times. Well, the Cavs have Mobley and Allen. So Mitchell always has a pick and roll partner with him. He's always had a second ball handler with him, whether it's Garland or LeVert. So things have, like, even though there isn't the 3-point shooting he had around him in Utah, he's still able to generate better looks, and the load is lighter on him as a result of that. And you just don't know if that would be the same thing in New York. I could certainly see it working out, but it's so tough. Like it's not something that I would rip the Knicks over. I think is the simplest way to put it.
Well, to your point you just made, like Evan Mobley is a pick and roll partner with Donovan Mitchell. That's not what Julius Randle is, you know, and even during the summer, at least from our perspective, it was like once the Mitchell trade happens, then you have to trade Julius Randle, which he wasn't an asset last summer. And
you're dealing from a position of weakness, right? Like teams know you're trying to move a guy, they're going to lowball you.
With how bad he was last season, especially just like you couldn't depend on him off ball. You couldn't depend on him with the ball. Obi Toppin seemed to look like a better option off ball. And so it was like, if you get a Donovan Mitchell, I guess you're going all in on offense because, like you said, the fit in the backcourt with him in and Jalen Brunson isn't great in the backcourt, especially on defense. And then you've traded all your wing depth. So I guess Carmelo Anthony is your starting three at that sense, because you've traded Grimes and Quickly and whoever else would have went in the deal. So while the sentiment was like, thank God they didn't, go all in like this when they weren't ready. And that's what to Knicks fans that I empathize with, because very, very rarely do you get a generational offensive player like him. And when you can get the guy, you get the guy. Like, this goes back to the Carmelo Anthony trade, where it was like, well, you had a chance to get the guy, so you got the guy. And it's the team building issues I have after that trade that I'm more critical of.
Right.
And so
also, like, there's just like the collective hurt, right? Like, the Cavs fans can relate to this. Like, when you feel like you're in the mix for a player all the time, but you don't get them, right? Like, there's going to be just that frustration that builds over time. And that's been a thing for the Knicks. But I honestly, like, me looking at it as an outsider, I think this is the most kind of stable that I've seen the Knicks be in a long time. Like,
you'd never know it from covering them, Justin. I agree. I'm just like, wow, like, the thing we're arguing about is on the court. Like, that's the only thing we have an issue with. We're talking about drop coverage versus like how they're guarding the pick and roll. We're not talking about whether the owner banned somebody from the arena. We're not talking about whether Charles Oakley's allowed to go attend games. We're not talking about what entrance Spike Lee walked into or what Max Kellerman said. Like, it's all on court is what the Knicks conversation is, which is what I've been begging for years,
Right. And when you're at a point like that, as frustrating as it is, I'm sorry to say, some of it's trial and error, right? Like, you try different coverages, you try different rotations. And even though like a rotation might not be working, coaching staff might want 7-8 games of sample size to see whether or not that can work. We're working on something through walkthroughs and shoot arounds, and we want to like really kind of test this out. Like, the Cavs did that to start the year with Karis LeVert, like as the starting small forward. And funny enough, that's still the 5-man combination that works the best with the core four. I think it's like a +9 net rating, but it wasn't best for LeVert. So he's now coming in off the bench, right? Like, you're going to give different looks, different coverages, different schemes, different rotations, prolonged looks, because basketball can be noisy in small sample sizes, and you want guys to have the opportunity to work through it, especially when you're talking about young players that are malleable and can adjust and grow into different roles. Like, you might have shortcomings with a certain lineup, but if the coaching and player development staff feels like guys can grow into that role and they can adjust and learn from these experiences, you might do that with a young team, even if it leads to inconsistent results in the immediate present.
Well, in the immediate present, the Knicks play the Cleveland Cavaliers. When people hear this will be in about 7 hours. So tonight, here on Tuesday, they welcome the Cavs to MSG for the second time this season. The last time they played was one of the more interesting matchups, because the Cavs, you talk about missing open looks. Oh boy, did they miss a ton of open threes that game. And I want to say it was 13 travels were called in this game on a Sunday night in MSG. I don't know if you caught wind of this, but there was a lot of chatter, not just in Twitter, like legitimate reporting was done that had the Knicks lost this game, like got blown out by the Cavs with Donovan Mitchell coming to MSG for the first time, that the Knicks might even have a new coach. And instead, it started an 8-game winning streak that I'd argue saved the coach's job. They went 17. They've just finished a stretch where they were 17-10 before this little losing streak that they just had. And now the Cavs come in, and while they're 5-5 in the last 10, they're obviously coming off a win against the Bucks. And Donovan Mitchell hasn't played his last 3 games with a groin injury. So I guess my first question is, what is your guess about his availability for Tuesday night?
I kind of feel okay about it. During the Bucks broadcast, Brad Daugherty had mentioned that he had talked to Donovan Mitchell, who said that he wanted to play that game against the Bucks, and JB Bickerstaff was kind of playing it safe. Like, let's make sure that this doesn't become a recurring thing. So as I mentioned, this is the first time they've had 2 days off in a while. So maybe that kind of factored into the calculus that we rest you against the Bucks and you get an extra 2 days of rest. Then we can go to MSG and try to run this back as a full unit for the first time in a long time. So maybe he plays, but I can still see like they've been very cautious with injuries because that's part of why you go out and trade for Donovan Mitchell, right? Like last year, the drop off was so damn dramatic when Darius Garland was off the court. And now they have the ability to kind of weather the storm. If you miss Jared Allen, they still had actually their defense improved for like the 5-game stretch that they missed Jared Allen because Evan Mobley was just playing so well over that stretch. So obviously, I'd like to see Donovan back. I think the one thing that they've been kind of robbed of to start the season is just not enough time with the core four together to kind of feel things out. But yeah, I would guess that he'd play, but it's funny looking back at that loss to the Knicks that they had earlier this year. There's been a couple games like that where a team beats the Cavs. It's a frustrating loss for the Cavs. You're looking at the record of the opponent, and then they just go on a massive run. Like the Kings, I believe, had lost like 3 games in a row. They were well below 500, but then they beat the Cavs. They had a great shooting night, and then they just went on a run and haven't looked back since. So maybe I'll take that as a compliment, as a form of flattery. Teams feel like, hey, let's get up for the Cavs. We'll beat them, and winning, it kind of helps rally the team. Hasn't been the case in a very long time. So maybe that's what it is. But I know from my perspective, it'd sure be nice to see the Cavs come out with a more consistent effort and really attack the Knicks on the interior.
Well, from my perspective, I'm very much hoping that trend continues and that a new streak for the Knicks starts once again after playing the Cavs. Would be I'm not someone that roots for injuries, so I wouldn't hate seeing Donovan Mitchell in attendance. As a fellow Mets fan, I happen to be a big fan of Donovan Mitchell. In fact, my conspiracy theory is that karma is real, and the moment that Donovan Mitchell didn't get traded to the Knicks actually happened to coincide with the Mets' downfall in the month of September. So not saying one is responsible for the other, but the way that things just happened to suddenly turn around for the Mets in a different direction, allowing the Braves to catch them in the division, just happened to be like the moment Donovan Mitchell was a Cavalier and not a New York Knick. So
look, man, the universe is all connected, and one wave here affects another wave there. You never know. Yep.
Never know. Although I'm telling you, I think I do know this one. Dustin, you've been amazing with your time today, and I really appreciate it. Last question. Again, you're part of the Cavs media family. How does that feel? As like a member of like you're doing a podcast for the Cleveland Cavaliers.
I mean, it's still very surreal. Like my biggest thing is I just don't want to fuck it up, right? Like for me, I it's been really, really refreshing that they've allowed us to continue like the same tone of the podcast, right? Like we were able to have conversations like when prior to last season, I could talk about, hey, like maybe it's time to cut bait with Kevin Love, and we're not hearing from it, right? Because I just take it because we're not doing it for a career, right? Like that is a side thing. It's all right. Let's not be hot takey. Let's try to present both sides of every argument. And then from there, we can have kind of productive conversations about what the next steps are or why we feel the way we do. And just kind of being solutions orientated and really kind of process driven and connect with the fans. And I don't know. I feel like a sense of responsibility to not mess it up because one, I like having that partnership for sure. But at the same time, like I just think it is a really unique thing that we're able to do this from a fan perspective where we're not diving into the sources game. We're not going outside the lanes that we have and just kind of facilitating conversation. And I'm honored that there's enough listeners out there that are looking for that kind of content. I'm honored that the Cavs felt like there's some value to it and continue to platform us. So just don't want to mess it up. And I can't believe how much things have changed with the team, even since we started back in, I guess that was February 2021, that it initially got announced, and the team seems to be on the upswing. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Talk about the karma changing with the team once something happened. Once you got there,
we're franchise changing edition, right?
Clearly, bigger than LeBron coming back. I'd argue.
Shout out Kobe Altman. He had the vision.
There you go, Justin. Thank you so much for joining me. Tell everybody where they could find the Chase Down, and obviously you on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at Cavs Canada on Twitter. Just slap the Cavs in Canada, and I apologize for everything you find after that fact. You can find the Chase Down on the Cavs YouTube channel, and you can find us as well wherever you get your podcast, wherever you're listening to this. I'm sure you can find us there as well. So we appreciate anyone that's willing to check us out.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin.
Andrew, thank you so much. Have a good one.